I stood under the lights of the aisle, the hem of my white dress brushing the floor, while my mind stayed strangely calm in a way no one would expect at a wedding. Everything was so quiet, I could hear the small footsteps of Mia, my daughter, as she stepped out of her row and walked straight toward me. She didn't smile. She didn't speak. She just handed me a folded piece of paper. I opened it. Just a few lines. Jonas's name sat right in the middle. The handwriting was familiar enough that I couldn't mistake it. I looked up just as he saw the paper in my hand. Our eyes met, and in that second, he knew. I didn't need to ask. I didn't need to say a word. The secret he'd been keeping for months was no longer his alone. He shifted back half a step, not because he was afraid of me, but because the truth had just shown up bare and uninvited in the middle of our ceremony. I didn't rush to fold the paper. I didn't move from my spot. I just looked at him, with eyes cold enough to tell him we'd talk, but not here, and not with shaky voices. Then I pulled in a short breath, let my chest settle, and I rewind. My name is Talia. I'm a nurse at a small clinic in town. Some shifts run 12 hours and leave my eyes red, but my mind somehow stays clear. Divorced people are like that. They learn how to get back up quietly, without dropping anything, without asking anyone to feel sorry for them. I left my first marriage on a completely ordinary night. No fighting, no breaking things. Just a moment when I looked in the mirror and no longer recognized the woman who had been trying to breathe evenly day after day. After that, it was just me and Mia. The two of us lived simply, calm, few words, but never short on love. Jonas came into my life 2 years later, not loudly, not by pushing his way in, just a recently divorced PE teacher, a little reserved but kind, always asking me questions short enough not to make me put my guard up. He didn't look like the type of man who wanted to fix anyone. He just showed up like someone who knew what it meant to keep walking when your legs still hurt. In the beginning, Jonas kept a very clear distance from Mia. I knew he was scared. Adults who've been through a collapse aren't always confident stepping into a child's life when that child isn't theirs. He didn't try to be a stepdad. He didn't try to make Mia like him. He just greeted her, asked softly, and kept enough space between them. I noticed that and appreciated it. And maybe because of that, I opened up faster than I expected. Jonas had these small details that made people trust him. Once, our elderly neighbor's car died while her son was away. Jonas knelt on the pavement, got his shirt dirty, and fixed it without saying a word. Another time, 2 kids in the neighborhood crashed their bikes in front of the gate. He crouched down to clean their knees, then let them ramble on without interrupting. With me, he always let me go first, always gave me room to think, never demanded to know everything. I used to think a man like that couldn't possibly have a big secret. But Mia wasn't as easily convinced as I was. She kept her distance from him, clearly. When Jonas walked into the living room, Mia would grab her book and sit farther away than usual. If he asked how her day was, she would answer with a sentence short enough for anyone to know she didn't want to go any further. Jonas didn't complain. He didn't try to break that wall, but he watched her in a way that was hard for me to explain. Not guarding, not suspicious, just attentive. So attentive that sometimes it felt like he'd known Mia longer than he claimed. One afternoon, I got to Mia's school earlier than planned. As I walked down the hallway, I saw Jonas standing in front of the school activity board. He didn't know I was there. He was staring at a poster about programs for new students, his eyes fixed on the list of teachers and volunteers. He stood there long enough that anyone would have thought he had a child enrolled. When I stepped closer, he startled a bit, then gave a small smile. "Just curious," he said. I didn't answer. I just looked at him a beat longer than usual. A nurse who's used to observing can catch a lot from the way someone avoids eye contact. After that day, I started paying more attention. Jonas knew Mia's school event schedule better than I did. He'd ask if she was joining the reading program or if she liked her new math teacher. All of it made sense if he was just trying to understand her. It's just something didn't quite fit. But I didn't ask. I'm not the type to dig through everything out of suspicion. I just believe this. If a secret exists long enough, it will find its own way into the light. And it did. Right on the aisle. Right when Mia put that piece of paper in my hand, the one Jonas thought no one would ever see. I looked at him. He went pale, and I knew we were about to walk into the hardest part of the truth. From the moment I saw Jonas lose color in his face, a part of me knew the scattered pieces from before were finally finding their place. Not betrayal, not a poisonous lie, but a truth big enough to make him step back like he was afraid of touching something fragile. And I needed to understand it, not with anger, but with the familiar steadiness I've always had. The small signs started to gather into a chain that made sense. Jonas had a habit of asking me about Mia more than any man about to become a stepfather normally would. He asked about her math homework, about her group reading sessions, about whether she still sat alone during lunch. All normal questions if they came up once in a while. But with Jonas, the frequency was too steady, too precise, like he was getting updates on Mia every week. I thought he cared, and he did care. But then he started knowing too much about the school's schedule. More than I did, more than the parents I met at conferences. One morning, I tried asking, "Seems like you remember the school events faster than I do." He paused for a split second, then just smiled. "Maybe I pay attention." The answer was neat, cool, too neat to explain anything. I didn't ask further. But as a nurse, I'm used to noticing every small change in someone's rhythm. One evening, when I walked into Jonas's office to hand him some papers, he shut a drawer right away, fast enough to make a sharp click. I caught a glimpse of a yellow envelope inside. No label, no name. Not mixed in with the bills or tax documents. He didn't look at me. He just said calmly, "Just random stuff." I stood at the doorway for a few seconds. Long enough for him to know I noticed something was off, but I turned and walked out. Not because I trusted him, because I wanted to see how far he would go to keep it hidden. While Jonas grew stranger, Mia changed in a way I didn't expect. She'd always been guarded, didn't like strangers, didn't smile easily. After my divorce, she pulled in even more. Anytime a man stepped into the house, even if it was just the plumber, she would sit far away and watch with a caution no 11-year-old should have. So when Mia started relaxing a little whenever Jonas was around, I noticed right away. Not that she was close to him, she wasn't, but the way she stopped avoiding him when he sat at the dining table, or stopped grabbing her book and running to her room when he asked about her day, was a clear change. One night, while I was folding laundry in my bedroom, Mia leaned against the doorway and looked at me like she just thought of something but wasn't sure if she should say it. "What's going on?" I asked. She stayed quiet for a few seconds, then said slowly, "I think Jonas understands me more than you think." I put the towels down. "What do you mean?" "Nothing." She said it too fast, then walked off before I could ask anything else. A child can be good at lying, but not good at running from eye contact. I knew Mia was holding something, and whatever it was, it had to do with Jonas. When I started paying closer attention, I realized there was a strange kind of distance between Mia and Jonas. Not dislike, not closeness. It was like a thin thread connecting them, visible only when I wasn't looking. There was a moment when Mia walked past Jonas in the kitchen. He was washing a glass. She looked at him for exactly 1 second and smiled. A tiny smile. A real one. But the moment I stepped into the kitchen, Mia pulled her face back in, cold as usual. Jonas did the same. He looked at her with an expression I couldn't decode. Not the look of someone trying to impress her, not someone trying to act close. It looked like the look of a man who'd known her before, long enough to understand every small reaction. But every time I appeared, he turned to me right away, as if he was worried I'd noticed something he didn't want me to see. Both of them were careful in a strange way, like there was a secret between them, and I was the only one on the outside. And that made everything simmer in the exact way real suspicion usually begins. No noise, no proof, just a cold feeling in the chest when things line up too neatly to be coincidence. I didn't have a reason to think Jonas had done anything bad. Men like him, steady, modest, never flashy, rarely cause the kind of harm that breaks a child. But my instincts, the instincts of a mother, kept telling me there was a part of the story he'd locked away too tightly. I noticed his eyes every time I mentioned Mia. He avoided them, like he was afraid I'd read something in them. People who hide things, not awful things, just things they believe shouldn't be seen, often have that look. A beat too slow, then turning away too fast. Once, during dinner, I mentioned casually, "Seems like Mia's more comfortable with you lately." Jonas tightened his spoon, just for a second. Then he loosened up and smiled. "Yeah, maybe." Only 2 words, but they didn't sound like the words of someone simply happy the kid was opening up. They sounded like the words of someone who had known it would happen long before. I set my water down and looked at him for a few seconds. He didn't look back. That was the moment I realized I wasn't looking at scattered details anymore. I was seeing a line connecting everything. A line Jonas had tried to hide, not out of guilt, but for some other reason. Something big enough that both he and Mia chose to stay quiet. I didn't ask. I didn't make a scene. I just noted it, every detail, and let them sit still until the truth opened itself. Every secret has its moment. And Jonas's secret was exactly 1 step away from that moment. Mia's step, on the aisle, with that folded piece of paper in her hand. The day before the wedding, I was working on the guest list when I heard Mia's footsteps running down the hallway. She almost never ran inside the house. She was a careful kid, always measured. The rush in her steps was the first sign something was moving faster than I thought. "Talia, can I borrow a pen?" Mia asked, slightly out of breath. "There's one in Jonas's office," I said. She nodded and disappeared. I didn't think much of it. Not until she walked out of that room a few minutes later, empty-handed, her face not tense but not normal either, like she'd just seen something she didn't yet know how to handle. "You didn't get the pen?" I asked. "I found one already," she said. "Short? Dry?" Nothing added. That was the second sign. That night, when Jonas stepped outside to take out the trash, I noticed his office door was slightly open. Inside, Mia was standing at his desk, looking into the open drawer. I didn't hear rustling. No paper. She was just standing there, staring into it like she was trying to make sense of one last piece of a puzzle. When I tapped my fingers lightly against the wall, Mia startled. She turned, lips pressed together. Not the look of a kid afraid of getting caught doing something wrong. More like a kid afraid of saying something she hadn't figured out yet. "What are you looking for?" I asked. "Nothing," she said. The same old answer. But this time she had a yellow envelope in her hand. I recognized it as the envelope Jonas had shoved away a few days earlier. Mia handed it to me. "I think you should see this." Inside was an old letter, the corners slightly creased, a letter from Mia's school, thanking Jonas for participating in the support program for students who struggled to fit in. His name was right there on the volunteer list, as clear as black ink on white paper. I read it again. There was nothing vague about it. Jonas had been involved in activities at her school, more than once, so his questions about the school schedule weren't harmless curiosity. So his careful watching of Mia wasn't just an adult's instinct. So all of it had been happening right in front of me, longer than I realized. Mia tugged on my sleeve. I checked. Jonas was at 3 events I went to, but I didn't know because he wasn't using his last name. A cold truth moved through me. Not an ugly truth. Just a truth I hadn't been included in. That night, I didn't ask Jonas anything. I wanted to know why Mia, not me, was the one who found the secret. And I wanted to see how long Jonas would keep his silence. The next day was the wedding. I walked down the aisle knowing I was heading toward an answer, not a vow. Every step on that white carpet felt like moving closer to the truth Jonas had been avoiding. Mia sat in the second row. Her hand was wrapped around something, held tight in her palm. But I didn't look too closely. I didn't want to force her to share before she was ready. Until the officiant asked, "Are you ready?" Mia stood up, walked toward me. Not slow, not fast, just enough for everyone to turn and watch. She opened her hand and gave me a small sheet of paper folded perfectly. The folds were too neat to be a child's. She had clearly sat with it the entire night. I unfolded it. It wasn't the original letter. It was Mia's copy written in her own handwriting. "Thank you, Jonas, for supporting our students during the integration program. Volunteer, Jonas Hale." Every word, nothing added, nothing missing. I felt Jonas tense on the other side of the aisle the moment I finished the first line. He didn't move toward me. He didn't speak. He just stared at the paper in my hand like it was exposing everything he tried to fold small all this time. He understood immediately. The second I looked up, he already knew. The truth didn't need an explanation. It stood there on its own, between us, so clear that nothing could blur it. I didn't ask, "Why did you hide this?" I didn't have to. He knew I would. And I knew he already had an answer. He just never dared bring it into the light. Mia stepped back to the front row and sat down, her eyes fixed on Jonas. I felt a slight tension pull between the three of us. Not the tension of betrayal. The tension of something that, once spoken, would feel lighter, but still strong enough to make someone cry if they were fragile. Jonas wasn't fragile, but he was caught standing between the truth and his own fear. I took one step forward, kept my voice low and steady enough that the whole room could hear every word I was about to say. "You didn't think I would understand." One sentence, nothing more, no accusation, no pointing out faults, just the center of it, the thing he feared most. Jonas didn't move. His face went pale, not from shame, but because I had hit the exact place he'd been avoiding all this time. The truth he hid wasn't about what he did, but why he did it in the dark. No one in the aisle said a word. No whispering, no curious looks. No one saw Jonas as the one at fault. No one saw me as the accuser. All they saw was a white silence, the kind of silence that gives truth a shape, an edge, a sharpness. I folded the paper, set it beside the bouquet in my hand. I didn't walk away, didn't stand taller, just stayed there, waiting for Jonas to speak one honest thing after months of holding back. But I didn't force him. No one was shamed. No one was named guilty. Only the truth stood in the middle of the aisle, steady, unmoving. No one in the room shifted. Even the light felt still, like it was waiting for Jonas to choose how to speak his truth. He tightened his hand, then released it. One deep breath, then another. I didn't push. When truth wants to rise, it rises on its own. Finally, he took a step toward me. "Talia, I'm sorry I kept it from you," he said quietly, his voice low but steady, like a man who'd been waiting for this moment longer than I had. I didn't answer. This was his space to say the rest, the part he'd kept locked in the dark all this time. I went to Mia's school before we officially started dating. The words fell lightly but sharp like cold metal. At that time, I'd just gone through my own divorce. I wasn't sure if I was still someone who could be good for you too. I was scared of messing up, scared of making things worse. I listened without nodding or shaking my head. I just watched him. Jonas kept going, slow but clear. I didn't want to step into Mia's life without understanding who she was. I saw how she pulled away. I saw how she looked at strange men. I knew one wrong move could make her shut down again. I remembered their first moments together. Jonas's awkwardness, the distance he kept. Every detail began to fit. He came across information about the integration support program at Mia's school, Jonas said. I signed up. But I didn't use my full last name. I didn't want anyone to know. I just wanted to understand her before stepping in. I asked, my voice low, and you thought hiding it was the best way? He looked down for a moment. I was afraid you'd think I was trying to win her over, afraid Mia would think I was trying to replace her dad. And he swallowed. I was afraid my past would be dragged into it. It was the first time I'd seen him talk about his past with real unease. Jonas had never said much about his first marriage, just that it didn't fit. Now he continued, slow, like every sentence had to be weighed before leaving his mouth. My ex-wife used to say I didn't know how to be a father, that I was clumsy, that I only made things worse. I believed that for so long that when I met you two, I didn't dare try in any open way. I thought if I did it right, good. But if I messed up, then no one would have to see it. There's a kind of hurt that doesn't need shouting or bruises to prove it. It sits in the eyes of the man standing in front of me, someone who believed words that made him smaller for years. I kept my voice steady. Jonas, you don't have to pretend to be strong. You just have to be honest. He lifted his head. No smile, no tears. Just looking at me like I was the last person allowed to see the part of his life he'd kept hidden. Talia, I didn't mean to lie. I just didn't know when the right moment to tell you was. The right moment, I repeated. In a marriage, the right moment is when the truth exists, not when you feel safe. It wasn't a harsh line, but it hit the center of everything. He straightened, like someone who just heard a sentence that was light but fair. I turned to the officiant. I'm sorry, we need to pause the ceremony for today. Not canceled, not walked away from, just paused. No one in the room whispered. No one looked at us like a failing couple. They only saw two people trying to tell the truth before tying themselves to a promise. Jonas nodded once. He didn't argue. He didn't walk away from me. He just stayed there, letting me choose a pace we could both keep. Mia sat in the front row, her hands laced together. When I got close, she stood up right away, like she'd been waiting for me to ask what she'd been holding inside. Why did you give me that paper? I asked, keeping my voice soft but steady. Mia glanced at Jonas, then back at me. I wanted you to know he tried, she said. I just didn't know how to say it. One short sentence, but it cut straight to the center of all this. Jonas wasn't being exposed. He was being defended by the very child he feared would misunderstand him most. I knelt so I was at eye level with Mia. How long have you known? I found the envelope yesterday, but before that, I just thought he cared in a different way. Not like adults who try to be nice, more like someone who knew what I needed. Mia had never spoken that much about Jonas before. Every word she said was light, but true. Jonas stood behind her, not cutting in, not explaining. He let Mia speak for him. Maybe the first time he believed that a truth coming from a child, still clear and unfiltered, wouldn't make him smaller anymore. I placed my hand on Mia's shoulder. Thank you. She nodded and stepped back, giving me space to face Jonas one last time that day. I said, calm and steady, we're not getting married today, not because I'm leaving you, but because I want the three of us to talk for real, together. No secrets, no fear. Jonas took a breath. I understand. and he did. His face didn't hold the strain it had when he realized the secret was out. He looked like someone who'd finally put down a weight he'd carried for far too long. I stepped back half a pace, just enough so we no longer looked like a couple trapped, but like two adults choosing each other again through the truth. The aisle was still bright. No one fled. No one collapsed. It was simply a pause, cool enough, clear enough, human enough to become the first step towards something that could actually last. We left the aisle without yelling, without running, without a single raised voice. Just 3 people walking out of a moment more important than the ceremony itself. The moment the truth was spoken, and no one turned away from it. Jonas stood in the yard, his hands clasped. Mia stood close to me, but not hiding behind me the way she usually did. She just looked at him, calmer than I expected, not blaming, not afraid, like she was waiting for him to say something he should have said a long time ago. "Talia," Jonas began, his voice low but not rushed. "I'm sorry, not because I went to the school, but because you had to find out like this." I nodded slightly. "You could have told me from the start." "I know." Jonas let out a breath. "I just thought, if I told you, you'd think I was trying to prove something. And I've gotten too used to being treated like the clumsy man who never does anything right when it comes to kids." I didn't step in. This was his moment to open the parts he'd kept sealed. Mia spoke before I did. "I used to be scared of having a stepdad." Her voice was small but steady. "I thought anyone who married Mom would just bother me." Jonas lifted his head, startled by how honest that was. "But," Mia went on, "when I saw you helping other kids at school, I knew you weren't the kind of person I had to avoid. You weren't scary, just shy." I looked at her. She said that last part with a calmness, the kind that comes from a child who's watched long enough to know the difference between someone who's kind and someone who only acts kind. Jonas didn't answer right away. He stood there, trying not to hold his gaze on her too long, like he was afraid that looking too deeply would make her back away. "Mia," he said softly, "I never wanted you to think I was trying to take someone's place." "I know," she said. "If you wanted to take someone's place, you would have made more noise about it." A short breath escaped me. Not a laugh, just relief. Hearing her say something even I had never found the right words for. When everything settled, we sat on the steps outside. No decorations, no guests, just 3 people learning how to speak a little more honestly with each other. I turned to Jonas. "What I need from you isn't perfection. It's not about whether you were right or wrong for going to the school. I just need you to say things straight." Jonas nodded. "I will. And don't hide things from Mia anymore," I added. "She's smart enough to know who's trying for her." Mia tilted her head, agreeing in that very Mia way. Jonas looked at the 2 of us longer than usual, but this time his eyes didn't dart away. He wasn't afraid of being read. There was only a layer of honesty he'd taken years to learn. In the days that followed, nothing changed overnight. No big family hug, no poetic promises. Jonas started sharing more, not in long speeches, but in small details. His work schedule, how tough a PE class had been, the nerves he had about stepping into a new role in our family. He said enough for me to understand, but not to ask for sympathy. Mia opened up in her own way. She didn't run up to hug Jonas, but she didn't step aside when he walked past her. She didn't go silent when he asked about homework. And sometimes she told him about a new friend in class without looking at me first to check my reaction. As for me, I watched the 2 of them with a steadier feeling than I'd had in years, not because everything was perfect, but because for the first time in a long time, I felt this family had a real chance. On a Friday afternoon, Mia's school held a fundraising event. Jonas was invited to volunteer, this time openly with nothing hidden. Mia and I went together. When we walked onto the school grounds, the other parents greeted Jonas like a familiar volunteer. He looked at me, a little startled from embarrassment. I just said, "Just be yourself." In the busy, noisy air of the event, Mia ran off to get a drink. When she came back, she looked at Jonas for a moment, then held out her hand. Not too quick, not hesitant, just a simple gesture from a child saying she'd accepted someone, in her own quiet way. Jonas looked down at that small hand like he couldn't believe it was meant for him. "Is this okay?" he asked softly. "Yeah," Mia said. I stood behind them, watching their hands meet. No fuss, no show, just a moment steady enough to close the long months where both of them were afraid of doing something wrong. Jonas looked at Mia, then at me. No big smile, just a warm, steady glance. I nodded. I didn't say anything, because sometimes the truest acknowledgement doesn't come from long sentences, but from the way a woman stands still and lets the two most important people in her life reach each other naturally. I looked around the schoolyard, the afternoon sun falling on Mia's hair, on Jonas's hand, on the small distance we'd spent so much time closing. A distance no longer cold, just light. In the end, here's what I learned. Even without shared blood, love can run deep enough to break through anything. When someone is willing to take a step toward you, the past, the fear, and the distance can all be mended. There are still people in this world who choose kindness, even when no one asks them to. That's the end of the story. Thank you for staying and listening all the way through. If you have any thoughts about our journey, leave a comment. I'd really love to hear what you think. And don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss the next story. Thank you for being here and spending your time on this one. Your support is something I never take for granted.